This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, health, tax, professional advice. We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast. This podcast is not intended to replace professional medical advice. The views expressed in this podcast may not be those of the host or management. This podcast may contain adult themes, so parental discretion is advised. So welcome to the Modern Titus II Woman Unplugged podcast. Our podcast is one where we fearlessly dive into the unspoken struggles that shape the lives of women today. As part of our mentoring role, we seek resources and support designed to help women thrive. We explore strategies for achieving up in every aspect of our life. I am thrilled and very thrilled to introduce all the way from Zambia, Tabu Lakato, a beautiful Zambia. She's going to introduce herself and just give you some brief background about her. So listen on, it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful podcast. A lot of information. Tabu?
Thank you so much for having me on this podcast, Lorna. Thank you so much. I am excited to do this. So yes, I am Tabo Lukato. I'm a 28-year-old lady. I'm Zambian. I live in Zambia, in the heart of Zambia, which is Lusaka, our capital city. It's in the southern part of Africa. So I am married. I have a husband and a little baby. She's 7 months, almost 8 months. And I have a degree in clinical medicine. So that makes me a medical licentiate, is what we are referred to in my part of the world, which is equivalent to a physician assistant in other parts of the world.
Yeah, PA.
Yeah, PA, yes. So I'm also just completing my master's in counseling. So I'm a psychotherapeutic counselor as well. And I've been living with HIV for over 20 years. So I've been on HIV medication for this is my 21st year. So I'm an HIV activist, and I use a lot of my personal story, my lived experience to raise awareness on HIV, to humanize HIV. And that all comes together by combining my actual lived experience, by combining my degree, my clinical medicine degree, and my mental health that I'm now bringing in to form a whole of what I do. So that's about me.
Okay, so that basically gave me a segue into what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you to share your personal journey of living with HIV and how it has shaped your outlook on life. So you basically answered that question already. But if there's anything you want to put in, anything you want to add to that? If not, we go to another question.
So it's basically asking about my experience with HIV.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If your personal journey. If you want to tell us how you contracted it, or give people an idea.
Okay. All right. So I'm not sure when exactly I contracted it, but I know I was tested, I was diagnosed, and I started my treatment in 2003. Yeah, that should have been 2003. And I was, as I said, I'm 28. So if you go back, that was actually right. 7. I was in the second grade when I started taking my medication. And I'm not too sure how I contracted it. And I always like encouraging people sometimes we do also a match on how you actually got it. But then I think what we should be concentrating more is what you do moving forward after you've had it, because we categorize people and try to judge them according to ways in which they might have contracted it, like were they born with it, was it sexually transmitted, and all that. But I don't think that should be a major focus. So I started taking my medication before I actually understood what I was doing, like what the medication was for, because I was a minor at that point.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, you're a baby at that time. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm taking it every time. The few times I ask, I'm being told, okay, it's for, you're just staying strong. It's just to keep you healthy. I'm like, oh, okay. You don't really question it too much. But then I only got to understand what the medication was for when I was starting my 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
That's when they sat me down and told me to say, okay, so this is what it is. This is HIV. You have it, but you have this medication you're taking, and it can actually help you and prolong your life. And, you know, the basic psychoeducation. So at that point, I did have an understanding of HIV, because that was the early 2000s when HIV was rampant in Southern Africa. HIV was rampant in Zambia. So we had all this awareness raising. We would have TV commercials on prevention of HIV, and we would have all these books and stories to try and educate us, even at school and in the media. So I had an idea of what HIV was, how it was transmitted. So I was like, okay, it was a bit shattering, because I knew the stigma and the discrimination that is attached to it. Exactly. So it was, I had a lot of questions, like, am I actually going to, so how long am I living for? Because quite right, you tell me that the medication I'm taking is going to help prolong my life. But does that mean I only have, what are you talking about? And looking back then, we didn't really have the information we do have right now. So there were these questions running through my head, growing up as a teen, knowing if I'm going to be able to, am I going to be able to get married? Will I find somebody? Do I have to get married to somebody who's HIV positive as well? Because am I going to find somebody negative who would want to marry me and be with me? Will I have kids? But then, I mean, we've seen it now, years later, we know that's possible. I'm married to an HIV negative man, and I have a baby who's HIV negative as well. So thanks to science.
Right. So since you were so diagnosed so early, what are some of the significant challenges you face? Because you were a young child when you first were diagnosed, and I'm sure the children, some children had, you're in an environment that children can be cruel. Children can be very cruel and all of that. So I wanted to know what was your experience at that time, being such a young child?
Okay, so I think growing up, one of the biggest challenges was having to listen to people speak a lot of negative about HIV, especially the times when I was in high school and I was in university as well. And it also eats you up, because it's an attack. It feels like an attack to you, even though the people talking about it and discussing don't actually know that you are living with HIV as well. But then there's navigating that whole, having to deal with the negativity of living with HIV and pretend like it's not actually affecting me. And I also realized how much impact it had on my life, because there are certain countries I really wanted to study from that have laws and regulations against people living with HIV. So that was like life throwing a curveball at me at the time, because I was so determined that I was going to do my studies from there before I actually researched and found out during the process that I can't get in because of my HIV status. So that was something that turned my life around, because I had the life planned out in a certain way. And then it didn't actually work out like that. So it's dealing with the loss of the inconvenience of living with HIV, especially at the time then, like 10 years ago, for example. So I think that was a major challenge that we still face, the community of people living with HIV. We still face, but it's not as bad as it was.
Has this influenced your career path? You're a PA and psychotherapist.
Yes.
Did it influence your career path? Your situation?
It definitely did, because I think because of the constant hospital visits, because at the time I needed to visit the hospital for my refills and for a checkup every 3 months. So that's something I got so accustomed to doing ever since I was 8 till now. And growing up and seeing that environment, I just felt like that was what I wanted to do. The joy and how the doctors and health workers made me feel when I went to the hospital is a feeling I wanted to give to somebody else. So I loved the sciences. I loved biology in high school during my secondary school years. So I was like, you know what, I could actually do this. I liked helping people. I liked the fulfillment that comes with actually changing and impacting somebody's life. So I decided I was going to get into healthcare, and that's how I got my degree in clinical medicine. But then over the years of actually studying clinical medicine and interacting with different people, I realized that I wanted to concentrate more on the mental health part
Yes.
of healthcare. And that's why I decided to get my master's in counseling.
If you
So
had, if you,
it's, I think I also bring in a point of view which is both from the patient and the clinician, if you get what I mean.
You're walking in the person's shoes. You can talk about it because you're walking in shoes. You anything that's going on, you can relate to it and be able to give them some level of comfort and sincerity about what you're saying to them because you're walking in the shoes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, how has a lot of misconception are around HIV. And I know initially when we spoke, you said that people were talking about HIV, HIV persons as if they were invisible. They talked about them in a way, although they're there, it's like they don't really care, that they're hurting their feelings with some of the things that they're saying. Does this still persist today in 2024? Does it persist today?
It does, unfortunately. It really does. So I think because I'm in a society where, well, firstly, we know that the major way of contracting it is it's sexual transmission. And I'm in a very conservative society. I'm in a society where sex is taboo. So once people hear that somebody is living with HIV, the first thing that comes to mind is, oh, they did something bad. They were sleeping around. They were all over the place. And then it's a topic we can't really talk about openly. It's now when we are trying to, but it's still a topic you can't easily bring up and say, oh, there's this about sex, there's ways of protecting. It's not something we just casually discuss here in Zambia because of our culture, our traditions. So there's this notion that the people who are living with HIV were promiscuous. So there's still that misconception. There's so much misconception on HIV, unfortunately. But we're seeing so much change. We're not the same place we were 10 years ago. We're not the same place we were 20 years ago. So there's that.
So with all these different cultural and probably religious impact, how do people advocate for themselves? How persons with HIV, how can they advocate for themselves with all these different things impacting them?
Oh yeah, so it's been a challenge. It's really been a huge challenge, but then we are able to, with scientific research that's coming up, we're able to justify why we need to advocate, why this is something that everybody should worry about and be concerned, especially with the high levels, because despite the nation seemingly being quiet and trying to avoid having the conversations on HIV and HIV prevention and treatment, but we're seeing the rising numbers because in Zambia, for example, our prevalence rate is at about 12% right now. So it's like 12% of the population. Yes, it's that high. So
I didn't know that.
The Ministry of Health has come on board to ensure that we are now having these conversations, to ensure that treatment and prevention is accessible to almost every part of the country. So I think because of the high rates, because almost everybody is having a friend or a family living with HIV, so we're trying to get as much people on board as we can. And people like me as well, who are trying to humanize the experience of living with HIV, have been able to help and make a significant difference in the public health space and how HIV is perceived. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you? What religious sector are you predominantly? What in your country? In that country?
Christian. So Zambia is actually considered a Christian nation, yes.
But well, I'm a bit surprised because Christians normally tend to be liberal in their thinking about things like this. I don't know, because we're in a different, I'm in a different era, like, you know, I'm in US. So probably it's different there.
So despite us being Christian, we also have our culture that also drives.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so it's a blend.
Really
it's
exactly.
a blend.
So the dynamic of combining our Christian beliefs with our cultural beliefs sometimes is what might cause the
Okay, because I was just wondering. Okay. So with this stigma and, you know, and all of that, people's self-esteem probably is very low. Persons with HIV have a very low self-esteem. And is that affecting the mental aspect? You find a lot of them to be depressed. You find a lot of them, what are you finding?
Yeah, so actually people living with HIV have been found to be almost 4 times more likely to have depression or anxiety or any other mental health illness, especially here in Zambia, because you're dealing with the diagnosis. You're trying to deal with something that you may as well have had a certain notion of it, and then suddenly they're telling you to say, oh, so you are actually HIV positive. And imagine if you've grown up and been conditioned to believe and see HIV in a certain light. So that really does affect you mentally. You're living with anxiety because you feel like everybody is going to look at you and perceive you in a certain way and judge you. And it causes a lot of anxiety. We see people not being able to actually go and get their medication from the healthcare facilities because they don't want to be judged by the people in their neighborhood. We see people go to the extent of having to travel to another town and get their medication from there because you don't want anybody in your own town, you know. So it's a lot of anxiety. Every time people are talking about it, you feel they might be talking about you. There's the depression that comes with it because some people are not privileged enough to have the knowledge. So you think your life is ending. You think your life is done. Unfortunately, we still have some people who think once you get it, then within a year or 2, you're dying. So that might actually cause a lot of issues with depression as well, because your life is over. Or you think you're not going to get married, or you're not going to have children, and that's the path that you saw yourself. So it causes a lot of mental health issues. And that's why I think our Ministry of Health, like the government, has ensured that with HIV treatment, they try to attach psychosocial counselors. So they have trained a few lay counselors who can give basic mental health services to people living with HIV, because they've realized just how much impact it makes. Because when your mental health is not okay, you can't take your medication as well. Because, because with HIV, you need to be able to take your medication every single day. And you know, with mental health, that is not always the case. If you're depressed, you have anxiety and anything else, it's so hard for you to stay consistent. It's so hard for you to get the motivation to do it in the first place. So it takes a lot of self-discovery, self-awareness. You understand a lot of psycho-education as well. And you actually gaining the self-esteem within yourself and realizing that you are not your diagnosis, and realizing that despite what you might have learned or believed, it's not a fact. It might be an opinion, it might be something because of your culture or religion, but it might not actually be a fact. So it's trying to now separate yourself from your diagnosis, separate yourself from society's expectations or opinions.
I'm curious. What about being employed? Do you have to disclose that when you're seeking employment? Do you have to disclose your status when persons with HIV are seeking employment? Do they have to disclose it? I was asking you how in regard to employment, do HIV persons have to disclose their status when they're being employed, or that's a private thing?
So fortunately, by law, you're not supposed to disclose your status. You're not required to. Yeah. So that has been very fortunate. We've been lucky. Okay, because I know that in the States, most times when you're going to do get employed, most persons have to do medical to make. Do you do that over there? Oh,
when persons are getting.
We do have our medicals as well, but HIV is not supposed to be a factor on whether you get employed or not. But that's not okay. Let me rephrase. So if the person comes and does the medical, will it show up in the results in anything? Can any persons come and see that the person has that? Like if a blood test is done? No. Okay. No, it's not something you can publicize to your employers. Okay, well that's good. Because I was saying, if the challenge is that, is it very hard for them to get job or what's the rate of employment over there in regard to, probably you might not know because you don't have to disclose it, but based on what you're saying, it's not a factor, therefore they can be employed in any sector that they want to, correct? Correct. Okay, all right, okay. But the problem is, just to add on to that though, there has been a recent challenge of the domestic workers, like house helpers, nannies. There's been a challenge where sometimes the individual employers want to demand for an HIV test because they say, I don't want a nanny who is living with HIV to take care of my children. So there's been issues like that have been ongoing and so strong. And there's debates about it, and people have different opinions on whether they should actually submit their HIV status or not, because you want to be a nanny or you want to be a house help and others, but by law, you're not supposed to. Yeah. But probably unofficially, it is happening. It might not be. It might not be officially happening, but unofficially, it is happening, eh? It definitely is. All right. So, in your case, did you have any psychotherapy for yourself? Did you go for therapy for yourself? In your situation when you were diagnosed, did you do therapy? So I actually did therapy much later. I first got into therapy, I think almost 5 or 6 years ago. Okay. What I had is I had basic counseling, where a lay counselor that I mentioned about to say the government employs some lay counselors who go through some short training. They sit you down and give you the information you need about HIV, living with it, how you can get it, how you can live a healthy life, and just telling just really the basics. Right. It's not really therapy per se. But then as an adult now, when I was in university and I had moments where living with HIV was now starting to get to me, because I was now navigating dating, I was trying to make friends, I was sharing my living space with people and trying to figure out how I'm going to continue living life without actually disclosing to the people around me. Right. The anxiety of that and wondering whether taking the medication was all worth it and all. So I got into I was having a few depressive episodes and I had to get into therapy, and that actually helped me a lot. And I think that was one of the driving forces that got me to actually get into the career that I am in as well. Right. So definitely persons who have HIV ought to be, it's supposed to be probably mandatory for them to get this therapy. What do you think about that? It should be mandatory. It should be part of the, yeah. Yeah, I highly think so. I talk to a lot of people who come to me and approach me and ask them to say, I think you need to make an effort to get into therapy, have a few sessions and process what what it is you're going through, because an HIV diagnosis actually changes how you view yourself. It changes your life's trajectory. It changes, it's a process. It's something that you have to learn to live with. And there's so many emotions to that. So it's you need a space where you can actually do that with a professional. So it's very important. That is why I keep advocating for mental health to be integrated with the physical health.
So in your estimation, with the amount of persons that you have who are HIV positive, do you have the manpower and the infrastructure in place to accommodate this therapy that you were advocating? Do you have the infrastructure? Do you have people that are qualified that can do it? Do you have enough?
The truth is we don't. The truth is we really do not, because I think that is why we had to get lay counselors, so that we get some basic mental health services. But then I think this is when people are appreciating the importance of mental health, and this is when people are actually considering it as a career choice as well. But then it's still very difficult. I think there's some stigma attached to it. For example, we have a hospital, which is the largest mental health hospital in the country, that is shunned on and heavily stigmatized. So that is where a lot of the psychologists work from in the country. That's where a lot of psychiatrists work from. And even just working from there comes with a lot of stigma as well. So you can just imagine how it is to actually try to get people to say, guys, we need you on board to actually do this, because in the country, I know we have less than 30 psychiatrists in Zambia. The population of almost 20 million people.
Wow.
So, yeah. So we really don't have the human resource. We don't have the manpower. And that's something that we're trying to build as we're advocating for this. It's something we're trying to get people who are trying to start up their careers and show it to them, say this is an option as well. And there's actually nothing wrong, because it goes hand in hand with the physical health as well. So this is when we're seeing more people trying to get into psychology, into psychotherapy, and provide those services. Unfortunately, the government cannot afford to hire as many psychologists as we would like them to. And the private sector is also not really, it can't really, obviously, mental health is expensive. Not everybody can afford therapy in the private sector. So there are all those challenges that we also have to, the system, I think it starts with the top, bottom, fixing the whole system and trying to encourage that, pump more finances and money. So that we're actually assured that if I do get in, will I be able to survive in this career? There are actually people who want to access the services. So yeah.
But it's interesting because I'm originally from Jamaica, Caribbean island, and we have the same sort of thing. People don't want the therapy; they shun it. They think there's like something. If your family know you're going to therapy, it's like a big disgrace. Nobody wants to do it, So you find a lot of people going about with mental issues that could be solved with just going to therapy, getting some treatment. Normally when it's left undone, it escalates to something more serious, you know what I mean? Right. So
it does.
It's not only your country alone. I've experienced it in Jamaica. We just don't like that sort of stuff. Yeah. So how do you balance, with your situation and your hectic job that you have? I'm sure your job is hectic. How do you balance your own health with doing all of this, with baby, husband, and all of that? There's a lot of stuff you're balancing. How do you manage?
It's a lot, because I feel like I wear so many hats, so it can get a bit overwhelming. It's a lot, but I think I've tried to be intentional about self-care.
Right.
I've tried to really be intentional about allocating time for myself, like even as I'm trying to schedule my work, my family, my, all the others, my friends as well. I try to be intentional to make sure that I have enough time for myself and my resting? Am I eating healthy? Am I drinking water?
Right.
Am I able and remember to take my medication every single day at the right time?
Right.
So I think it's really being intentional about it, because I'm one person who says willpower is not enough. So it's one thing, you can feel motivated and feel like, no, I can do it. I really do want to do this. But then you also have to make life easier for yourself. Willpower runs out at some point. So
yeah,
it's being a lot of intentional about it. I schedule it just the same way I'll schedule my clients for therapy. I make sure I also schedule time where I'm just doing nothing.
Yeah, just downtime, me time.
Yeah. So I'm quite intentional about that.
Yeah, that's good. I was sort of wondering how you manage all these different hats. But, you know, you said scheduling is important and self-care is important. So what advice would you give someone newly diagnosed with HIV in terms of maintaining the physical health, the mental health? What advice would you give somebody who is newly diagnosed with HIV?
Okay. So I would say you need as much information as you can, because a lot of I'm a Christian, so I always every now and then quote the Bible. So there's something we call say, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." And
lack of knowledge.
Really true.
That is true. It is true. Mm-hmm.
So you really need to make sure that you are empowered with as much knowledge as you can. You need to know what you have to do, how you need to take the medication, what are you doing, what's the way forward after you've received this HIV diagnosis. How do you see your life, and what steps are you actively taking towards working towards that? So if you see yourself living for the next 20 years and you have been given an HIV diagnosis, automatically you know that means you actually have to take your medication every single day. So it's looking back at the small steps that you're setting for yourself and trying to figure out how to make them into break them down into smaller achievable steps that you can do, and work. Everything that you do in your life should be working towards the goal you want to achieve. And HIV is it's a diagnosis, but it shouldn't define anybody, because it's just another part of your life.
Right. So how have you learned to embrace your scars, both physical and emotional, as part of your journey?
Okay, so I think embracing my scars I've dealt with that by being compassionate to myself. Because I think a lot of times we first want compassion from other people, but then you start with yourself. It's so easy to treat other people so well, and you forget yourself. You're so mean to yourself. You beat yourself up, and you're always... But then with other people, your sister and your family and friends, and you're so nice. So it's always something I try to tell myself is I need to treat myself as a friend. If somebody was to come to me, what would I say? If they came to me with a car, how would I treat them? What would I say to make them feel better? And I start doing that to myself as well. So affirmations have actually been really helpful, and I think that they can help. Almost every single person can benefit from positive daily affirmations.
I agree with you. And connecting with your creator, because that is where the life is, connecting with your creator. Because I always tell people, man can give you all the diagnosis, but the only diagnosis I believe is what God give me.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah,
so it's also just
God give me. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to also embrace your scars, like they are there. You can't pretend. You can't go about life pretending they don't exist. They don't define you, yes, but they are there. So you need to find a way of being one of them.
Right.
To move forward, accept them.
Right. And that segue into the other part of the question: the rewriting, to rewrite your story. You basically rewritten your story, right? Yes, rewrite your story. And, rewrite your story, and others can begin that process.
Exactly, because people might look at your diagnosis or any experience that you've gone through and automatically think somebody who's gone through this path is going to end up in this way. but then it's up to you to make the decision, to get into the driver's seat of your own life.
Yes.
And decide, like, oh, even if everybody says that, even if society says, no, people with HIV cannot do this, or people who've gone through this always end up like this, and like, but you are in charge of actually being the driver of your life.
Yes, yes, yes. Being control, taking control, and not letting what people say about you defining who you are. I tell people, all of us come here with a purpose, and sometimes diagnosis that people get and overcome it. Sometimes you wonder, why me, Lord? Why me, God? Why somebody else? Why me? But then again, he knows that he has a purpose for you. He's a purpose, like in your case, your purpose is to bring a face to the situation and hope for the hopeless. You know?
Yeah.
That's your, so you have a purpose. That's your purpose. And you embrace it. You're embracing your purpose and you're running with your purpose. You know what I mean? That's beautiful. That's beautiful. But you know what? You're talking about your story. It makes you a bit vulnerable. So how do you deal with the vulnerability of telling your story? You're here, everybody's gonna see you, and your family, your friends, and all of that. How do you deal with the vulnerability? The story.
So I think I like to believe vulnerability is a strength. It's a strength not many are able to do, but I wish more people would actually be able to embrace that strength and be vulnerable, because we humans are layers. I always like to think of it like as an onion. You know how onions have different, you can peel and you go in. So I think that's what we humans are. So for you to get the courage to unmask the first one, it takes a lot. It's scary because you feel exposed to the world. And I'm out here telling people about things that made me feel broken at some point. Telling people that at some point I wasn't as confident as I might look like right now. And that takes a lot of courage. But I think with the vulnerability comes you actually helping somebody else as well. Yeah, somebody else is looking at that. Somebody else who's in the very exact same spot is looking at that and is tapping from your experience.
But how do you navigate the people, even with your education and your status where you are, your PA, your professional, highly recognized professional? How do you deal with the stigma? People gonna still reject you. People are gonna still have look at you and have negative things to say. How do you navigate that? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so it's been a challenge, but I think I've reached a point where I have realized that a lot of the opinions people have on me, a lot of the opinions people have on you have very little to do with you and me. A lot of the opinions have so much to do with them. It could be coming from a place of ignorance. It could be coming from a place of insecurity. It could be coming from a place of just cultural or religious conditioning. So I have to constantly remind myself to say, they might be throwing these words, or they might be treating me in a certain way, but it actually has very little to do with me. It has to do with them. They are reacting from something that is from an experience they've had, from something they believe, and that's okay, because we have different beliefs, we have different experiences that actually shape our opinions and thoughts. So I think that constantly acts as a reminder and gives me courage to say, even if I am going through this in my workplace, from my colleagues, it's not a fact. How people treat you and what people say is not a fact. It's an opinion. And I think we really need to remind ourselves of that so many times. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I know you said that you're married and you have a child and all of that. So the intimacy part of it, I mean, you a lot of persons would say that person with HIV, as you were probably alluding to when we first had the discussion, that they should be only marrying persons who have the same status. But in your case, you said that you have a non-HIV husband, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. So would you, if you care to you know, don't go into, I mean, not intimate, but just general, or you can talk general about somebody else, generally, that's fine.
Okay, no, I get you. So the thing with living with HIV is that you also need to be able to learn the skill of disclosure, because at some point you're going to need to disclose it to your partner or your family or your friends. So that you need to be vulnerable with your partner or your future partner and explain, to say, this is what I am living with and this is what it means. I was fortunate enough to have found a man who knew and understood HIV and its modes of transmission. And once I was able to disclose my status to him just after we met, we had a discussion about the way forward. So what does that happen for us? What does that mean for our sex life, for example? So that was when I had to now educate him about the scientific discovery of U equals U. There's this undetectable equals untransmittable. So this is basically meaning that for a person like me who has been living with HIV for so long and I've been on medication, and the medication is actually working because my viral load is so low that when I go and have my blood work done, they're not able to detect it in the laboratory. So automatically that means even if we're actually intimate, even if we have sex, I'm not able to transmit to my partner, and automatically not able to transmit it to my future children as long as I maintain the undetectable viral load. Yeah, so there was a lot of discussion on that. It included a lot of research where we both sit down and this is what it says, this is what it works. Go to the HIV specialist and they actually confirm your what you found out and your thoughts and your fears. So I think it also brought us closer. Like for me and my husband, going through that whole process brought us closer, because it's me inviting somebody else into a world that
your personal space, a very, very, very personal space. That's true.
Yeah, so there's that. So it does actually bring us closer. But I always tell people as well to say sometimes it doesn't actually work out, and you might find a partner who is not having it. Like, no, we can't go ahead with this relationship at all because I do not believe what you're telling me, or that's not possible, and it's not about to get infected as well. And I think that's okay. It's unfortunate, but it's okay because we can't control what people want to do with their lives. It's sad because you mourn the relationship and what could have come out of it. But then it's something you have to learn to move on from, in as much as it's painful.
But I always say that relationships that don't work out, that wasn't the relationship for you. That person was meant for somebody. That person was meant for somebody else and not you. When the time comes, the person that's meant for you will come your way. That's why I look at stuff like that.
Yeah. True. I believe that too.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to be wrapping up soon. So, what message do you hope to leave with our audience today, about the power of resilience and the possibility of change, regardless of life challenges? What you want? You have any nuggets you want to leave with them?
I just need every single person to know that there's always room for change. There's always room for some change that you can make in your life, and you are the one who has the power to make the change. As long as you are motivated enough, you are capable, and there's an opportunity, you can do something about making the change in your life. If you don't like something, if you don't like how you're feeling about something, what people are saying about something, there's always a step you can take forward. So it's about looking at an opportunity and wondering trying to figure out, looking at a challenge rather, and trying to figure out how this is an opportunity for you to make a change. So that's something I want more people to to be more intentional about looking within their lives as well as they go through challenges, as they look at the world in general. It's what step can you take to make this change that you want? What are you doing to make the change you really want to see?
Yes. Is there any website or any way of contacting you if somebody wants further information or to know about you and what you're doing? Do you have a web page or what do you have?
So I have a profile on LinkedIn with my name's Thabo Lucato. So you can just connect with me there. My DMs are always open. It's always nice to interact and have discussions with so many different people. So I'm always open to that. I just recently actually also started a podcast as well, which people can listen to. Yeah. So the podcast is basically talking about behavior change. So we're looking at behavioral science insights and how this can contribute to health behavior and mental health and physical wellness in general. So that the podcast is on YouTube and on Spotify. It's Reclamation.
Okay, so what you can do after this, you can send me in an email and I can put it in my notes in Spotify. Yeah, that'd be great. So thank you so much for joining us on this journey. It's been a pleasure, and yes, the pleasure, the journey of resilience and self-love and the courage to own your own story. As we learned today, knowledge is important, but what we do with that knowledge can transform lives. So I thank you so much, and I appreciate you and the work that you do. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right.